I'm Laura, and I want to welcome you to Adventures in Creating, the place where I take you on an adventure to create something hopefully awesome. Today, we're going to be making. I'm all out of coffee. But wait, don't despair. If your coffee pot is broken, or if you would just like a way to make coffee and have it on hand without making it fresh every day, today is the episode for you. We are going to be making cold brew coffee. Why would you want cold brew coffee instead of regular fresh brewed? Well, not only can you make a large batch and have it on hand just ready to heat up in the microwave, or if you have a kettle to heat some water with it, or it is also the type of coffee you want to make if you are a fan of iced coffees, because it loses the bitter flavor because the heat is what brings that out when you are roasting your coffee. And I love a good strong brewed cup of coffee, just like many of us. But there are definitely times I don't want it so intense. I want something that's got a milder tannin flavor, if you will. I might not be using the terms correctly. Don't judge. But I have found that as I've gotten older, if I drink a cup of coffee I brewed first thing in the morning, that's a little rough on my stomach. Cold brew does not have that though, just because of the reaction that happens with the beans, and the heat is what causes that bitterness, that intensity that can cause issues in your stomach. But the flavor is just as good, if not better, with cold brew, because you can make it ahead, have it on hand, as well as you can use it in things to be on the sweeter side if you are feeling that day. So stay tuned and let's get started. We are going to go on our adventure and create some coffee. To make our cold brew coffee, we are going to need the items you see before you. Now, you do not necessarily need the cinnamon sticks or the whole cloves. You could just make this with a plain coffee. I'm making mine with decaf because I don't need as much caffeine as I get. So I'm trying to cut back on that on a regular basis. But I'm going to be making mine a spiced or fall themed flavored coffee. So I'm going to also be adding in the cinnamon and the cloves. But if you don't like flavored coffees, keep it simple, cut those out. You will need a measuring cup. You're going to want a glass one, which is a liquid one. It can be plastic too. That's fine. I have seen those out there. You will need a funnel. This is a funnel. If you do not have a funnel, choose your bottle of choice and just cut around the top portion. This will act as a funnel to help us pour items such as the coffee or water, if need be, into our container. You will need a container to pour the items we're mixing. So I actually use an empty bottle of carbonated beverage that I like to consume, and I've washed it out, made sure it's nice and clean. I will be using this because I can close it, put the lid on, it stays nice and safe and out of my way. Other item that is not necessarily 100% needed, but is very helpful, especially if you're not making a big batch. If you're making a small batch, you will want to have a kitchen scale. Reason being is we are going to be doing a ratio of coffee to water to make our cold brew mixture. In so doing, I am going to just put the entire container in. That's how I normally make it. You can, of course, make a smaller amount, in which case you're going to want to weigh out in ounces how much coffee you're adding to tell you how much of a ratio you need for your cold brew. And without further ado, let's get started. I forgot to mention you will need coffee filters to strain this afterwards, but this is something you will not need until the next day when we go check on this to strain. Our first step is we are going to be taking our funnel, and like I said, if you do not happen to have a funnel on hand, cut apart a bottle you may have used for something else and use this to help you guide pouring in ingredients, whether they're solid like the coffee or whether they're liquid like your water. This will just help avoid a big mess. I'm going to use my standard funnel. It's nothing fancy. There we go. And we're going to start. I am going to put in 1 whole stick of cinnamon. I'm doing this because when I put in my stick of cinnamon, that is going to give me a nice fall seasonal flavor, which just, for me, I get excited for. I like my flavored coffee. 1 stick right on in. Then I'm going to take my whole cloves. I happen to have a big jar of it because I'm a little weird. I like cloves. They go well on things. And I'm going to take 2 cloves. You can, of course, add more. I like making cold brew coffee, and I especially have been enjoying experimenting with different spices and seasonings. You could put in something like a little pinch of cayenne pepper if you wanted a spicy kick to the end of yours. You could put in a little bit of cocoa powder to add a chocolatey flavor. Lots of things. This is a great way to kind of go wild and experiment and see what you're going to find. Now I'm going to add my funnel onto my bottle, and I will take my coffee. I'm using decaf. As I mentioned, I try to cut back a little bit on my caffeine. And try and show you this a little bit better. Into my funnel, I will simply pour my coffee. And do be careful when you're doing this. Try not to spill everywhere. And if you find that you're putting your coffee into the funnel and it's not going down very quickly, it seems to be stuck, just take something like a chopstick, or if you happen to have other wooden dowels around, or even a knife to help break up so air can get in and help the coffee go on down. As you can see, it's basically going in. And get out all of that coffee goodness. Wonderful. So that was 1 whole container. Containers of coffee, they often come in 11 or 12 ounces. So that is what we have. Mine is 11.3 ounces. Woohoo! And when we are doing this, this is basically a ratio. So what that means is I'm using a certain amount of coffee to a certain amount of water. So the easiest way to remember this is you use essentially 2 ounces per cup of water. What does that mean? So that means if you have a 12-ounce bag of coffee that you are making, you are then going to be putting in 6 cups of water. So an easier way of thinking of it is you use half as much water as you do for coffee. And what this does is this makes a very intense concentrate of coffee, which is wonderful. And little fun side note, cold brew does not have the bitter taste that normal hot brewed coffee would. So now mine is 11.3 ounces. So what that means is I am going to use 5.5 cups of water. So I will start. I have some water that I poured out here and pour it right into my 2-cup measure. When you are measuring liquids of any kind, you want to make sure that the liquid that you pour goes right up here to this line. And you want it to be level with that line when you are down on level. When you look above, it can make the water look higher than what it is. Or actually can make it look lower. It dips. It skews your perspective. So when it is level on there, I know I have my 2 cups. And looking down, that looks good. I will take this and I'm going to pour this right into my same funnel so I can help any of the coffee grounds that did not go down get back in there. That was 2 cups. We still need another 3.5. So I'm taking my water, pouring it right into my 2-cup measure, making sure I fill it up to that line. Wonderful. And I will just pour that in. So now we are at 4 cups. We need 5.5. So going in, here's our 1 cup. So I'm going up there since I've had 4. And once I hit that, I need to go up another 1/2 cup. Excellent. So there I have my water. Pouring that in. And as you can see, our container is pretty full. Now all we need to do is find the lid and put that on. We have the lid on our container here. And I like to use, as I mentioned, a carbonated beverage. It could be a different kind of beverage. You know, if you get iced tea or something in the gallons, or if you buy gallon jugs of water, these containers are great to repurpose for things such as this. So I am then going to shake up my coffee. There is no strong scientific method to this. I'm just going to be shaking and shaking until it seems well mixed. The idea is we want the water to be hitting all the bits of the coffee. And then, voila. We're going to let this sit overnight. We want to let it sit between 12 and 24 hours. And I usually aim for about the 24-hour mark, so just so that enough of the coffee gets absorbs the water and the flavor, and it all comes together. So this is all we are going to do now. Next time you see me, it will be a day later, and we will be getting ready to strain this and make something delicious. Now my coffee here has sat for about a day. It has been close to 24 hours. So now, even though we didn't apply any heat and we hardly did anything, I am going to strain out the coffee grounds and get the delightful coffee that is there. So the easiest way I found is to take a fine mesh strainer. So this is very fine mesh. This does not have big holes. This will stop any coffee grounds that might fall through my coffee filters. I'm going to take a coffee filter, and I have my stack. I'll put it right in there. And I have my stack right here because I might end up needing more than one. Then I find it best if I just take a pitcher. Why do I strain into a pitcher? Because I'm just going to store my coffee in there in the fridge for several days until I drink it all. So then, very simply, I'm going to take my coffee mixture that has been here. I wish you could get a whiff of this. It smells so good, so nice. And we are going to simply pour that into the coffee filter. Another reason I like to use old carbonated beverage bottles is because they have a smaller spout that we are pouring out of. So this does, obviously it's liquid, it's coffee, it will strain through. But we have, of course, in there also all the grounds. You remember we put an entire container of coffee in there. I have my container still here. It was 11.3 ounces, an entire container. So now I poured in coffee, and I'll angle this up a little bit so you can see, or I don't want to go too much, or here, I'll just adjust this. But you can see my coffee is draining through. It goes slowly because there are a lot of grounds. It will go through. If you want to speed this up, you can, of course, have 2 fine mesh strainers and 2 coffee filters set up so that you are pouring out and draining in 2 areas. I have done this before, and this does also maximize the amount of coffee you get out of the mixture. So feel free to do that if you prefer to do this a little faster. For me, I take the time. So after this drains, I'm going to continue draining this. I'll show you when I pour in the next part. Now, for me, it has been maybe 5 to, I want to say 8 minutes. And as you can see, my coffee has gone down a significant amount. So at this point, I am going to add some more of my cold brew mixture and put that right on in top of this. Reason I'm doing this is just letting more of it strain through. And this will take a little bit of time if you're doing a small filter like this. If you happen to have some large, maybe, I don't know, professional level, restaurant quality, large coffee filters on hand, this will go faster because you can pour a larger amount of the coffee in. And if you happen to have followed on my how to make little Halloween ghosts video, I talk about using some of the restaurant quality coffee filters in there. And otherwise, this will take a little bit of time, probably 5 to 10 minutes per section that you pour in. And that's okay. If you feel like you start getting a lot of grounds inside of your coffee filter and it's just not draining through, what you can do is pick that up and swap it for another coffee filter. This is actually why I keep the stack right next to where I'm pouring it. It does, of course, you do have to be careful when you're transferring the coffee from this coffee filter, but, well, here, I could show you. This is pretty full. I poured this in, but we'll try and do this. Well, how I do this, and this is also why I use a fine mesh strainer underneath, is, well, we'll see. This might be a little bit too full for me to do. But I lift this up as carefully as I can and quick tuck another one underneath and let the contents spill out into that. And it does speed up a little bit, and I think you can see here with the light and try and not get drips everywhere. There's quite a few grounds, just sort of slowing down the progress of the draining. So I am going to discard this coffee filter and let this section continue to drain. And I will meet back up with you after this section is done draining and we're ready to do something else with what remains of our coffee grounds. Now I had poured, while in between just filming and all of that, I poured out some more of my cold brew mixture into my coffee filter. So that is draining away and it will continue to drain, but I want to get rid of what we have left, which is essentially looks like sludge. So it's not very pretty. That's okay. You have a few options of what you can do here. What you can do is you can dump this into another bowl with a coffee strainer and a sieve, because this is, for lack of a better word, chunkier. This is full of still lots of good coffee, but there's a lot of grounds. The majority of the grounds are. Now, I will caution you, with this lower portion, you are much more likely to get some of the coffee grounds in. And if you pour them all in as one ginormous clump, then it's not going to drain very well, because the water, for the amount of moisture, has to work way too hard for what's left. Other options you can do, if you do any sort of gardening, feel free to put some of this onto your plants. This will put a lot of nitrogen into the soil. Just a little fun side fact. I enjoy gardening when I get the chance. Or, here's another option. I'm overloading you with options, I know. You can, of course, add water, slightly less than what we did the first time. So for the first amount, we added 5.5 cups. Now you would want to add something closer to about 4.5 cups. Let this brew again overnight, or 12 to 24 hours. You could have another batch of cold brew ready to go the next day. I will say though, while this does work, you still get lots of good flavor. It does have a slightly more acidic and more bitter flavor than the original batch will. Or of course, you can put the lid on and pitch this for easy cleanup. I am going to pour some of this lovely muck, and I'll tilt this up. You can see there is quite a bit of just sort of ugly, muddy looking water there. And it's coffee grounds. It's water that's very laden with the coffee grounds. And I'm going to let this pour out basically until I feel as though it's not going to be worth it. So I'm going to hold this here for a minute or two. And then after that, I am just going to put the lid on and pitch the entire bottle. And because here you can see, oh, nope, we picked up speed again of... So basically, I'm looking forward to when it starts just doing a few drips and then stops altogether. And as you can see, it still is giving me a consistent, though slow, amount of liquid pour. And here you can see it's just started to become some drips. So I did hold this for about a minute or two, just letting as much of the moisture come out of it. And for me, that's going to be good. So what I do for easy cleanup, honestly, if I had a garden, I would save the grounds, but right now I don't, just because where I live, it's not quite conducive for it. I will just put the lid on my bottle and I'll plop the whole thing in the trash. If you want to, of course, you could rinse the grounds down your drain if that's something you do on a regular basis, or if you happen to have soil around, add that into it. Now you are going to still have your coffee filters draining in this time. I will meet back up with you once these finish draining. You can see in there, it's still going. You can see it's not a super fast process. It doesn't take extremely long, but when you're sitting there staring like, all right, drip, 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 it just seems to be taking longer than you want. But in total, maybe 20 minutes, and it can be unattended. A lot of times when I make this on my regular daily basis, or not daily anymore, but what I'll do is I will just pour almost all the liquid out into a few containers and just go about my day and come back in, 30, 40 minutes, check on it, see where we're at. But you will be left with, and I'll tilt this bowl up, this lovely coffee in here. Now this is our wonderful coffee-rich concentrate. I will talk about it when you see me then, of a few ways you could drink this, how you want to utilize this, and how delightful it is. But there we go. We have coffee. It's going to be overall less bitter. Slightly, the tannin will be less, so if you have a sensitive stomach, I find that sometimes first thing in the morning, a cup of freshly brewed coffee, while delightful, sometimes sits a little uneasily in my stomach. But I can drink cold brew, no problems, and that's because the way the tannins are dispersed, it is slightly different. So I will meet you back up in well, in just a moment, and show you what I have made to drink with my delicious coffee. I just made my coffee, and it is delicious. I am always happy for a mug of it. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make your cold brew coffee, and that you put it to all sorts of wonderful uses. Whether you're having your regular hot cup of it, or making a delicious iced coffee sensation. For this, all I did was I mixed in a blender some strawberries, cold brew coffee, a few tablespoons of it, and about a cup of milk. You've got a delicious coffee drink here. I put it in the fancy cup because then I feel fancy. Whatever your choice, I hope you had fun going on this adventure and that you learned a way to create coffee that will be hopefully convenient for you as well as taste delightful. Word of caution, when you're making cold brew coffee, if you are following the directions the way I did it, it does make a strong, very strong batch of coffee. So for example, in my standard mug, I usually use about 5 or 6 tablespoons of cold brew coffee to about a cup of water. Or milk if I want it super creamy that day. That is just my ratio. Of course, you can add more or less of the cold brew coffee if you want either a stronger or weaker cup of coffee, depending on your preference. But I hope you enjoyed. I hope you made this, whether you're making something cold and frosty and creative, or you're making something hot, ready to serve for people, and you just don't want that coffee pot running over and over and over. Please subscribe and ring that bell so you can be notified about new crafting and cooking recipes. Also, please leave me a comment if you made this, how you used it, if you used the coffee concentrate to make a delightful coffee cake or coffee ice cream. Trust me, those are definitely viable options. I fully recommend doing that as well. Or if you made this recipe and just simply had your own cup of coffee. Also, feel free to follow me on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. I post things on there. I try to stay consistent and post pretty regularly, but I am always making something, whether it's food, because I eat every day, most of us do, or whether I am making something. I craft probably every day as well, but I post a lot of pictures and just updates. So please follow me, join me so we can have more adventures, and let me know what you do with your adventure. Thank you so much for watching. Come again, same time, same place next week. Bye!